everyone, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. Today I'm setting up my bullet journal for the month of August. This one took me a little more time than usual, so grab a big mug of coffee or tea, a snack or two, and of course your bullet journal. Let's get planning. For the month of August I decided to stick with an Art Nouveau theme, but change things up by adding a little color. If you follow me on Instagram and you've seen my past spreads for this year, you know how much of a deviation this is away from the black and gold I've been using all year until now. Starting out with the monthly title and quote page, I'm blocking out the edges of the painting with washi tape so I don't get paint outside the borders. In addition to venturing out into the world of color this month, I'm also trying a new medium. I've always been so inspired by the beautiful watercolor artwork and bullet journal spreads I see on social media, but because I've never actually used watercolor in my life before, I've always been a little intimidated and unsure if I wanted to invest the money on watercolor supplies. However, so many of the images in my Art Nouveau Pinterest board I use for inspiration look like they would lend themselves best to watercolor because of their vintage look. I've had a set of brush pens for a long time, and the other day I decided to see what it would look like in the back of my bullet journal if I just added some water to them and get them to blend and run together, and it turned out imitating the appearance of water quite well in my opinion. I decided to go with a botanical theme and chose a picture of Nasturtium because I love the look of their big round leaves. Because I am using an Archer and Olive notebook, which has 160 GSM pages, I didn't worry too much about bleeding through, especially because I tested it out in the back of my notebook before I got started. However, you will see later that certain parts of my paintings did bleed through a little bit, perhaps because I added too much water. I started out using the brush pen side of the markers because I thought I could get the colors to run better when I added water. Later you can see me switching to the fine tip side of the marker because I found I could get much more control, but still get the same nice watercolor effect. I'm actually quite pleased with the way that the blue and the green ran together to get a very washed out vintage sort of look. My process for creating the leaves was to first lay down a layer of blue, making sure I detailed the veins of the leaf, much like the spokes of a wheel. This was followed by laying down a layer of green. In the beginning, you can see I went over the same areas with both colors. Later, as I refined my technique, and I did millions and millions of these leaves over and over again, I focused the blue mostly on defining the veins of the leaf and distributed the green more on the periphery of the leaf, allowing for a subtle ombre effect. Finally, I took a damp watercolor brush and used the water to run the two colors together. What I love best about this technique is that the final appearance of the quote-unquote paint, when it dries, looks rather different than it does when you first add the water. You can see here that the first leaf I worked on looks quite distinct from the one I just finished. It looks faded and aged, or almost distressed, an effect I think really works with the Art Nouveau theme. Here I'm adding the stems and viney parts of the nasturtium. These were done much in the same way, first a layer of blue and then the green, or vice versa whenever I felt like it. Except that I often didn't add much water, and since the details were quite fine, I didn't want the color to run too much and ruin the precision of all the details. Like I said, I had to draw just about 1 million of these leaves, so in this next section we'll just speed right on through. You can see here I've switched over to using the fine nib of the brush pen as my new technique. Here is a zoomed-in view of the more detailed parts of the picture. Again, this was so much easier to do with the fine nib of the pen, and I do think that the colors blended out just as nicely. Now it's time to go back in and fill in the nasturtium's flowers. I used a combination of orange, red, and a mustardy yellow. By the way, pardon the cameo of the foot of my tripod in this picture. As a YouTube newbie, I am still working out the best way to set up my camera and lighting equipment. I hope you can bear with me in the meantime. As with the leaves, I am focusing more of the red in the center of the petals and more of the orange at the periphery. Not only is this the natural coloring of nasturtium, it also does help give the flowers more three-dimensionality. For my quote page, I decided to create a wreath of nasturtium with my quote written inside. In retrospect, I think that having the wreath opposite the monthly title page was probably a little bit busy, and if I had to do it over again, I probably would have kept it more simple with perhaps fewer leaves and elements, or I would have modified things to give some more contrast with the first page. However, I think it still came together quite nicely, and overall, I'm pretty happy with it.
On the track.
Now that the paint has completely dried from the first page, I'm going back to remove the washi tape. I can then go in with a No. 1 Pigma Micron and draw out a black border. Now I'm going in with an O2 Pigma Micron to trace out the outline of the lettering for the word August. I briefly considered whether I should fill it to be solid black versus filling it in with gold watercolor. But if you know me, you know there was no contest. Gold watercolor is one of the best things I've discovered in my bullet journaling journey, and I use it shamelessly whenever I can. The quote I chose for the month of August is a favorite from Bob Ross, whose show, The Joy of Painting, I affectionately remember watching as a kid growing up. I know I'm really dating myself here. Anyway, the quote reads, "We don't make mistakes, just happy little accidents." I love this quote because it's just a reminder to be kind to yourself. Mistakes in life are inevitable. However, more often than not, they are not as big a deal as you initially think they are, so you shouldn't let them get you down. It's similar to another quote I often see floating around, which is, "If it won't matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it." I had no idea how applicable this quote would be to my own spread this month, as you will see later in the video, when I make a few blunders. To err is human, and in the same way, a bullet journal's charm is in its imperfections. So here are my cover page and quote page complete. Moving on to my monthly calendar page. Continuing with my theme, I'm painting a vine of nasturtium, dropping down from the top of the page from the top left, and just another cluster of nasturtium growing up from the ground on the lower half of the page on the right. This ultimately covered up some of my calendar, but I figure I can always write over the painting if I have to, because the quote-unquote watercolor is transparent enough. Here's where you can see some of the paint from the other side striking through. Luckily, it was pretty subtle and it didn't really bother me too much. However, you'll see me intermittently check for bleeding when doing all of my subsequent paintings. My camera ran out of battery and I lost some of the footage of me completing this painting on the bottom right half of the spread, as well as the footage of me filling the gold watercolor. You can also see that I made a huge smear mark from the letter T when I impatiently tried to erase away all the pencil marks before allowing the paint to properly dry. One more goof was making the bottom line of the calendar one day too long. So I went back in with white out and tried to fix it, but ultimately I think whiting it out draws even more attention to the mistake. Oh well, you live, you learn. Happy little accident, right? Moving on to my monthly trackers. Because I have less space for art in this spread, and because, not gonna lie, at this point I was getting exhausted from drawing and painting so many leaves and flowers, I'm keeping it simple with just one nasturtium leaf and one flower. This month I also decided to change up my tracker format. Historically, the only tracker I have found helpful or interesting to me is a sleep tracker. However, my sleep this past month has been particularly atrocious, so I wanted to further investigate the things that influence the quality and quantity of my sleep. You can therefore see me listing the date, the day of the week, my call schedule. For those of you who don't know, I work as a surgeon as my day job, and the day of my menstrual cycle, as well as my coffee and alcohol intake. And obviously, at the bottom, I have listed the hours of the night so I can record how much sleep I'm getting. I'm also putting a mood tracker back in just to see how it all ties into everything. Here I am putting some bold lines in between each of the categories. Finally, I'm moving on to the first weekly spread of August. I've been keeping my weekly spreads fairly simple since I've had less time to work on weekly spreads in general. I've been sticking with black and white, with a splash of gold watercolor here and there, of course, simple line drawings, and using the rolling weekly format that I've really been enjoying the last month and a half. You can see me making yet another gaffe in the length of the vertical lines here for Monday and Tuesday, and again trying to blot them out with some whiteout. Don't! And because I didn't think I'd tormented myself nearly enough, I went ahead and made a line drawing of even more nasturtium to spruce up my tasks page. Ta-da! So there you have it, guys. Here's a flip through of my August 2020 bullet journal setup. I love the way it turned out. I hope you found the video enjoyable and or informative. Please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future Plan With Me videos. And if you haven't already, check out my Instagram page at Ruby's Bujo. I'll have all of my info as well as the list of all the materials I used in this video linked down below. Have a wonderful August. Bye!